What do Falcons do? Rise up. Welcome to Rise Up Reactions, a show where we talk all things Falcons, NFL, Georgia sports, and in general the sports news of the day. I'm your host, Dr. Lee Denning, lifelong sports fan, and today I'm just coming back to you with a video really quickly, a little bit more detail on the Ryan Nielsen hiring. So Ryan Nielsen ran a different defense than Dean Pease and Arthur Smith have run for the last few years. Falcons have been running a 4-3 defense, which is a 3-4 defense, which is primarily focused on linebacker play, theoretically some edge rusher play, but we have not really executed that very well. As a result, the team has not been particularly good on defense for the last probably 3 years or so. We've given up a ton of yards through the air because we can't get pressure on the quarterback. I do think our passing defense will get better once the rush gets better, and that's why I'm excited for Ryan Nielsen, because even though he has been primarily a defensive line coordinator for 4 years, and then he ended up being kind of assistant DC and then co-DC last year for the Saints over his 6-year career. So 4 years as a line coach, 1 as an assistant, and 1 as the co-defensive coordinator. His scheme is still different. He runs a 4-3. Also, his personnel that he ran out of that are a little bit different than the Falcons as well. While the nose tackles and defensive interiors tend to be about the same shape and size, Grady Jarrett being slightly undersized in terms of height, but he makes up for that in mass. They are still relatively the same, roughly about a 300-pound defensive interior. Now, where they do differ, though, is their defensive edge rushers. This last year for the Saints, they had Carl Granderson, 261, 6'5". They had Cam Jordan, 285, 6'4", and they had Marcus Davenport, kind of interior edge, at 6'6", 265. Now, let's contrast with the Falcons. Falcons ran Lorenzo Carter, 6'5", 252, so almost a full 10 to 15 pounds lighter than the average defensive edge for the Saints. Then you had Ebiketie, 256, 6'3", about the same height, but again, a little bit skinnier, not quite as much mass to try and block. And then Ogundeyi, he's a little bit more in line with the typical scheme for the Saints. He was 6'4", 268, but again, not necessarily an impact player. He hasn't shown that he can be a great rotational piece at that edge rush as far as I'm concerned. Didn't really contribute a lot to the defense this year, and I'm not sure that he'll be a long-term piece for the Falcons either. But all that to say, Nielsen does run a little bit different defense and a little bit different personnel scheming. More or less, I think we're going to have better success with him, and here's why. Let's talk about the Falcons' defense real quick. I'm not going to do like last year where I try to go down and talk about every defensive player, every defensive category that we need to talk about, to kind of get this channel off the ground. But things I did want to talk about this year: we were 8th worst in passing yards. We were 9th worst in passing touchdowns, 10th worst in rushing yards, 14th worst in rushing touchdowns. So kind of middle of the field in rushing, and then we were one of the worst, bottom third of the league in even bottom quarter of the league in passing. As far as blitzing went, though, this is where we really were bad. We were the fourth worst in blitz percentage on defensive plays run. We were the worst in QB hurries that actually got created. And because of that, combining the two together, we had the worst percentage of pressure on the QB by a lot in the NFL this year. Chicago Bears were also pretty bad, but we were the worst. We only had 21 total sacks this year, which again, it's better than 18, but I feel like if you take away that first Saints game where I think we got 4 or 5 sacks, this season almost mirrors last season in terms of pressure on the quarterback. So 21 total. We've had 39 in the last 2 seasons. Let's talk about how that matches up with the last 2 years' leaders. 2021, the Bills, 42 sacks. Okay, pretty good. And then this year, 2022 Eagles, 70 sacks. Actually, I think somebody else did better than the Bills last year. That just seems like a low number because I'm pretty sure that the Saints were better than that last year. So let me double check that stat real quick on Pro Football Reference here, just to see where were the sacks at. That's this year, 70 sacks. So the Eagles got 70 this year, which makes our 21 just look absolutely god-awful. And then, like I said, 2021, it was how many? Sorry, 55 for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I got that wrong. Bills did get 42 sacks though last year. But in terms of where the Saints were versus us, last year we had 18 total sacks. We were the worst in the league by a solid 11 sacks. The next worst team was the Eagles last year, which you see what happens when you just make a few alterations. I would say Jordan Davis has been a major factor for them, just eating up people on the defensive interior and allowing edge rushers to get to the quarterback, just changing up that scheme a little bit. But Eagles went from basically worst to first or second worst to first in the league. Falcons probably can make a big jump. I don't think we're going to go from worst to first, but we were 18 in sacks. The Saints, though, the last 3 years, Saints have had 48 this year. They had 46 in 2021, and they had 45 in 2020. That's more by a landslide in 3 years than what the Falcons have put together in the last 3 years. So I'm excited for the idea that the Saints are going to come in, or it's not the Saints, but the Nielsen is going to come in here and bring a different energy to the to our defensive line, and hopefully to our pass defense as well. Again, he was the co-defensive coordinator, meaning he had some play calling duties and was responsible for some of their success on defense as well. Other things that they did really well, they were the second best pass defense, third best in passing touchdowns allowed, so only allowed about 3,100 yards, which is pretty solid. That's just under 200 yards per game passing. And then they were, however, the ninth worst in rush defense, just slightly worse than the Falcons, and similarly with touchdowns as well. But again, if we can get pressure on the quarterback, which is what the Saints have done, it takes a ton of pressure off of our secondary. Now, I don't know if Casey Hayward is going to be there next year. We saved $5 million by letting him walk. He's a little bit older in terms of defensive corner for the NFL, but I don't know that you're going to find a lot of solid talent that can replace him. This is certainly the year to spend some good, solid free agency money on key defensive positions. Would love to maybe see Daron Payne come in on defensive interior. Some of these Saints guys, Marcus Davenport is an edge rusher. He's going to be a free agent, and the Saints certainly can't keep him. You're going to have guys like Jesse Bates coming in off of the Cincinnati Bengals at safety, who probably is going to be looking at free agency. There's a lot of different guys that could be impact players for the Falcons on defense this year that would help out in changing a lot of those stats. Now, do those guys fit with Ryan Nielsen's scheme? Only time is going to tell. But I just wanted to talk about that real quick. Talk about how we may have to do some retooling on the defense. As much as I love AK-47 and Arnold Ebiketie, he's a little undersized for what what Nielsen likes to run. He certainly could beef up in the offseason. And don't be fooled for a minute. Even though there's like a no tampering period, there's not a plan for these players to be doing official team activities. You would have to be crazy to make me think that Ryan Nielsen has not reached out to every returning defensive player so far and told them what he's looking for and expecting for them once OTAs come back, once the summer training camp series begins. You'd be crazy to think that he has not already reached out to players and told them what he's expecting. But guys, I'm personally expecting the Falcons defense to be better next year. This year, I didn't know what to expect. I'm glad we were just slightly better overall. But again, we were playing with one hand tied behind our back. Literally one third of our salary cap was going to pay players that didn't exist on our team. Matt Ryan, Dante Fowler, and then Julio Jones. They ate up about $60 million just between those three on a $208 million cap. And then there were a handful of other dink and dunk, $500,000, $1 million contracts that we were still paying out as well. This coming year, the only major contract is going to be, I forgot who we tried. I think Deion Jones is going to be $12 million of dead cap. And after that, we don't have any more dead cap to go for the rest of the year. Even with that, though, we're probably going to make up the difference for that because I don't think we keep Marcus Mariota. Right now, we have an estimated, I think, 54 or 56 million of free cap space because the cap has been set at 224.8 million. I'm going to call it 225 for making it easy. But we basically have about 54, 56 million, somewhere in there. And when we cut Marcus Mariota, because we are not going to keep a $14.5 million backup who walked out on the team at the end of the season, we will save $12 million. So we basically get that dead cap back. It will cost us $2 million or $2.5 million, something like that. Casey Hayward, if we don't cut him, he's a $7 million hit. And again, I still think he has something in the tank, but he is certainly a contract that I can see us letting go as well, because the dead cap on that is only $2 million. We would save $5 million that we could go to pay maybe somebody a little bit younger, or potentially use that money to re-sign Chris Lindstrom, or do something else that might be a little bit more effective for our long-term health of the franchise. But guys, that's just what I think. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. We are about a week and a half away from the Super Bowl at this point in time. I haven't made any content related to that. I may make at least just one video next week talking about it. I'm not going to be streaming that game. I don't have the followers yet. I would love to be able to get to a point where I'm streaming that game, though I certainly do enjoy the camaraderie of going to a Super Bowl party. But guys, I'm considering doing a live stream of at least the first round of the NFL draft this year, just to try and see how I like it, see if I can do anything with it. That would require me to kind of learn some editing software so I could actually make this a slightly more professional production. That would also be done at my home studio, which is slightly difficult due to internet constraints in the middle of nowhere. You wouldn't think that, because I do live outside of Athens, but we are in a different county. And as soon as you get to that county line, the solid internet stops. So we're about a mile over the county line. It just kind of really causes a problem for that. It's not interesting to you, though. Let me know what you guys think about the Falcons defense. Are you excited for it? Is there anything that you think we're going to see in the offseason? Who are guys that you in particular are interested in? Thank you so much to the 89 subscribers that I have at this point. I would really love to hit 100 by the time we get around to the NFL draft. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for liking, sharing, commenting, and as always, rise up.